Hello, welcome to Decentral Lounge, brought to you by GlobalStake, your institutional SOC 2 Type 2 truly decentralized bare metal staking service provider. Today, we welcome a very special guest to our conversation, William E. Quigley. William is the co-founder of WAX, or the Worldwide Asset Exchange, a purpose-built layer 1 blockchain designed for NFTs, Web3 gaming, and digital collectibles. With over 500 million NFTs created and partnerships ranging from Funko, Street Fighter, Topps, AMC, Wax has become a dominant force at the intersection of culture and crypto. But Williams' impact on the industry stretches far beyond Wax. He was also a co-founder of Tether, or USDT, the world's most widely used stablecoin, paving the way for modern crypto liquidity and trading infrastructure. Before jumping into crypto, William had an impressive track record in traditional tech and venture capital. He helped launch PayPal, was an early backer of MP3.com and Net Zero, and held senior roles elsewhere. With an MBA from Harvard Business School and over 3 decades of experience scaling breakthrough technologies, William brings a rare blend of institutional insight and decentralized conviction. William, so honored to have you with us today. Why don't we just start with your backstory? Like, how did you make that leap from Web 2 into the wonderful world of Web 3?
Sure. And just one clarification. My fund was the first institutional investor in PayPal. I didn't help launch PayPal. Just want to make that clear. As far as, going from venture capital, then ultimately into crypto, whatever you want to call it. I hate the term Web3, but blockchain related stuff. Probably the intersection there is video gaming. And I had started with 2 other partners, the first consumer internet venture capital fund. And we did a lot of the investments that you mentioned at the beginning. And but I was also, an avid video game player, and I liked trying to figure out ways to make money in the video game space. Ultimately, I partnered with a friend who created the first way of trading video game virtual items for fiat, for real money. And he, let me go on his board, and we were partners in that business with another guy actually for like 7 or 8 years. And it's not well known, but the video game virtual item business is kind of the predecessor to crypto. And I say that because video game virtual items, by like the mid 2000s, were really just money substitutes. All over the world, young people who couldn't get credit cards or couldn't get bank accounts, and it's billions of people who can't get those things. We're from a U.S. standpoint, we think everybody has Venmo and PayPal and a credit card, but in most of the world, it's not the case. And so they use these video game virtual items to buy stuff, as well as, of course, play video games, but they're used as money substitutes. And we ran the 2 largest marketplaces to help buy and sell across like 100 countries. And when Bitcoin became a thing, in 2010 and 11 and 12, a lot of the early people in that business were people who had come from my industry, from the virtual item trading industry. And it felt very natural to us why something like Bitcoin would be attractive, because we had already been helping people trade these things. Probably what was sometimes when you can contrast something, you're almost better off than someone who has no perspective at all. So we were used to the hassle that video game publishers put everyone through who wanted to trade the virtual items, because these are private companies and they don't like you trading their video game virtual items. And a lot of times they would ban your account and boot you from the game. And so there were some publishers that were fine with it, but a lot who weren't. So now my partner introduces me to Bitcoin and explains to me how, hey, this is run by this distributed workforce compensated through this token. And Anybody can do it, use it, transfer it to anybody else peer to peer. And there's no central authority that gets to decide whether or not you're worthy, right? That was very attractive. Now, I had to fight against what I had experienced in the 90s. All venture capitalists have scar tissue, and mine was with magic internet money. There were several attempts to have this internet currency, and we didn't know it at the time, but one of the problems was the lack of a blockchain where you could control how much of that token was produced. And in the early versions of this, there were private companies who, you know, it was kind of a trust me kind of a thing. We'll only release a certain amount of these of this internet digitized money, but of course there was no real way to know. And so a lot of times that those companies, they debased their own currency. There wasn't enough of there really wasn't enough of an e-commerce environment at the time either to justify it. But Bitcoin really appeared to solve all of the problems that I had experienced, which is why I took to it. Now, it took me a year and a half from the first time I heard about Bitcoin to when I dove in, because I didn't really understand what a blockchain was. And for anyone else who's been in that boat, don't feel bad, because I was building blockchains for 3 years before I understood what they were. I really didn't get it. And then it took several years of mudding around with it and then trying to explain it to people. And then I'd be like, wow, I'm really bad at explaining this. And then just, you know, at a certain point, I was like, I totally get it. I had crystallized down what made a blockchain magical. And from that point on, it became very easy for me to see what was useful and what was not in blockchain, because there was a lot of experiments going on, and most of them shouldn't even have been experiments, because they were not harnessing the value of the blockchain. And when I help people build in the blockchain environment, the first thing I do is I explain to them what it is that is, you know, all powerful about a blockchain. And I like to tell people the blockchains are the worst possible way to do virtually everything, right? They're the worst possible way to do virtually everything. But there's a few things for which they have no equal. And once you understand what that is, you can start as an entrepreneur focusing on what should I try to build that's going to harness this unique capability. But first you got to, you know, you do have to understand that. And that takes a little bit of effort. And a lot of people don't want to do that. They just want to jump in.
That's a crazy, fascinating backstory. We had a previous guest whose mother was actually playing World of Warcraft, and that was apparently one of the things that she was using. She said, "Can you find out more?" And she was 11 at the time. She said, "Can you find out more about this Bitcoin? Because people apparently are trading things in World of Warcraft for Bitcoins." You know, when it was
that's true. Yeah,
multiple. So then, is this what? Knowing that you had this background in these digital asset items from video games, is that what then gave birth to Wax? Is this where the idea first came along? And maybe unpack that a little bit, because Wax is quite unique compared to every other L1 out there.
Yes, it is. Well, for one, it's purpose built, right? So, this goes back a way, but, you know, if you pitched a venture capitalist, probably even still today, if you say, I've got this thing, this platform, okay, what does it do? You know, whatever you want. That's a very bad pitch, right? We do not like Swiss Army knives, because what that means to us is you have no idea how to sell this thing. You want the customer to figure out what to do with it. And that is, you know, that's not a great position to be in, because we're all fighting for mind share in business. And if you don't narrow down to the precise benefit to a specific type of customer, no one's probably going to pay attention to it. And so when we were thinking about tokenizing stuff, and we won't have enough time today to really talk about what tokenization is, but just for the sake of brevity, we'll just say it's a way to put a record of something, maybe a physical object, on a blockchain. When we were trying to figure out what we could do, video game skins, which are virtual items, was the thing we wanted to do the most, because we're like, hey, if we put a bunch of skins on a blockchain, no video game publishers can mess around with it, because you can't censor a blockchain. But at that time, this is like 2013, blockchains were very clunky, and they were all forks of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, very clunky blockchain. And then Mastercoin came along, and we were very significant in helping to build that. And Mastercoin is the predecessor to Ethereum. So Mastercoin was the first attempt to put an intelligent layer on a blockchain using smart contracts. And then because it was designed to interoperate with Bitcoin, and because the Bitcoin core developers were kind of just, I think, very blind to the need for an intelligent layer on a blockchain, they didn't support it. And so the core team of Mastercoin went and then created a native chain, which at the time was very risky. This is 2014. And they called that Ethereum. And they said, hey, we're going to have a native blockchain that has a integrated smart contract system. And but before that, when we were still working on Mastercoin, the thing we launched on that was Tether. And you could do something that's fungible, meaning it's kind of all the same, like all $1 bills. Fungible stuff are all the same token, like Bitcoin. You can do much easier than non-fungible, than when every single token is unique. And so we're like, well, skins are all unique. Every single skin is distinct, but dollars are fungible. So we'll just make a token that is a representation of a dollar. And we launched that on Mastercoin. And then since that time, it's expanded to many other blockchains. But the notion of trying to tokenize video game objects was still near and dear to us. And then in 2017, an early and very prolific Bitcoin or blockchain designer came up with a way to process transactions faster, what we call the consensus mechanism. And his name is Dan Larimer. And we saw it and said, oh, maybe now there's enough speed that we could actually be launching unique items on a blockchain. And that's when we decided to launch WAX. And so many people, by the way, at that time, this is 2017, who had never used blockchains, right? Most people just trade stuff on whatever, Binance or Coinbase. They don't actually use the blockchain. If you use the blockchain, you would know how bad they are, usually. And so they're like, why do we need a special blockchain? Why can't we just use like Ethereum? And I said, because Ethereum has a congestion problem. It can't process things fast. But, to me, it's shocking. But like 2017, Ethereum, was launched in 2015. So it's 2 years into the launch of Ethereum. And virtually nobody who's using it understands its main limitation is how fast it can process transactions. It wasn't until the NFT boom in 2021 that people went, oh, Ethereum's slow, right? But, we recognized that in 2017. And so we said, oh, let's try this experiment. Let's try to do video game related stuff, including NFTs. NFTs really didn't start to take off until about 2020. I think that was a result of us doing the Topps trading card company release. We released one of their IPs called Garbage Pail Kids. And we had like 50,000 NFTs of Garbage Pail Kids, and the first really branded NFT. And it sold out. I thought it would take about 30 days. It sold out in 24 hours. And that was like April 2020. And that said to me, oh, people really want to do this stuff. So it's going to be big. And a few months later, well, 6-7 months later, 2021 came. And as you guys might remember, if you were in the space then, NFTs became a phenomenon. And like all things that are consumer phenomenons, they became excessive. It became silly. People were like putting dumb stuff on chain as NFTs. People were paying too much for them. Market crashed, and that was that. I would just like to finish this point by saying NFTs are not pretty pictures. They're not video snippets. NFTs are just ways of recording information on a blockchain so it can't be modified, edited, or whatever. It could be a driver's license, a passport, birth certificate. And for this reason, I say NFTs will be a very big thing that consumers interact with in the future. They may not know them as NFTs, but an uncorruptible, uncopyable, tokenized item is quite valuable in this world today where everything is fake.
That last question or that last point leads to my next question. And a big topic of conversation around the industry is how are we going to get the next billion users on blockchain? And sometimes that's also a marketing tactic. And for stablecoins, Tether, it's been a way for institutions to dip their toes in, even things such as settling trades faster, moving money internally. Do you see games as the mechanism to onboard the next billion? And like you said, people may not even know that they're using crypto or blockchain underlying whatever they're using on a daily basis, but it's helping whatever they use run faster and have a better experience.
The only thing I would say is it won't help it run faster. Blockchains they're a terrible database on all dimensions but one, which is reliability or safety in the belief that the thing is genuine. There's no other way to create a item that is digital. It's a type of digital item called a tokenized item, but there's no other way in the world to create such an item that can be freely distributed peer-to-peer, where with certainty, with no effort, at no cost, instantly, that it's genuine. That's the magic of a tokenized item on a permissionless blockchain. So here's what I would say. Blockchains in their current form are not a mass market phenomenon. When I worked at the Walt Disney Company for a number of years, and we had this philosophy that consumers pray to the god of convenience. Consumers will always choose convenience over any other trait, over price, over safety, over reliability. It doesn't matter. If you give them a convenient option or the much better but really inconvenient option, they go for the convenient one. And blockchains are, in my lifetime, the least convenient technology aimed at consumers that I've ever been involved with. They're difficult to understand. They are very slow. Even when you get things like these improved consensus mechanisms I talked about, you're still at the thousands of transactions a second, no more than that. So I don't think blockchains are ever going to be like multi-billion person engaged with types of things, but you can use a blockchain as a component in something like that. So you could do batch processing of records to a blockchain. So in the event you want to see if this is real, you can go do that on your own. But databases, most databases that are used in consumer environments are really good at very fast processing. And that's because they don't need these insane security protocols. And they don't need those because they're captive. These databases are captive within this highly protected place like Amazon's data centers. So Amazon trusts that stuff on its database is not fake, right? And it's very hard to put fake stuff on its servers. This is a longer point, but I'll just make the quick observation that so Amazon can do that, right? Amazon can give you really fast processing. And because it's a captive database, which they can modify at will without your knowledge at any point, right? Because they control it. But because they control it, they can extract a very high cost for you using that. That Amazon brand that you rely on comes with a marketing element of trust. That's really, brands are really just trust nodes. And so by using a blockchain that's operated remotely with a large number of decentralized people, you don't have that brand overhead. But in order to get the trust in this distributed system, you have to go through a lot more security checks, which is what slows it down, makes it difficult to scale. So I think you could have elements of a video game that are using blockchains, but what I don't foresee is a blockchain-based system, just 100% blockchain-based, that is consumer scaled. And when the VCs came into blockchain, which wasn't like 2021, they were very clueless about this. They kept telling me, well, we don't want something that's only partially on the blockchain. We want it all on the blockchain. And I said, but guys, that doesn't scale. Well, maybe we can get it to scale, but there's a lesson there in not understanding something that you're investing in, which could lead to big financial losses. We'll save that for a different day.
No, I mean, I just want to be mindful of the time, and it seems like the conversation has already passed so quickly. Just you talked about things that you don't foresee. Do you have any prognostications, if you will, about what the future entails for just this blockchain space?
Yeah. So obviously the most used token on Earth is Tether, most traded, $30+ trillion of trading volume annually. That's all because every crypto settles against Tether, because people want it settling against a unit of measurement they understand, like a dollar. The biggest contribution that blockchain will provide to humanity will be stablecoins. All of the world's major economies in the next 10 years or so, I think, will tokenize their currency, their fiat currency. They'll use stablecoins. All of the world's major consumer companies, Amazon, Facebook, Alibaba, all those guys, will all have their own stablecoin. All the banks. The banks may form consortiums, which is what JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and B of A are doing now with a few other banks, and issue their own stablecoin, though I don't think that'll be on a blockchain. But so that'll be the biggest benefit, stablecoins. And then, tokenized real world assets. That I think is also a very productive area. It's taken longer for that to catch on than I thought it would, but I'm confident it will. Part of why we built WAX was for this. Tokenized assets are a terrific way to trade. So those are the two biggest areas, I think. DeFi, which requires stablecoins, also a very big area. And frankly, we would be much further along than we are today if it hadn't been for the just the oppressive regulatory environment that people like me had to contend with for 15 years. Much of the world did everything it could to kill Bitcoin, and then kill Tether, and then kill other tokens. Looks like we've won the battle, but I'm still cautious. But it's now we can start to do things without this constant threat of some sort of new regulation shutting this stuff down. So I'm hopeful that we'll see a lot more innovation in the next, like, maybe 5 years.
Well, I know I could keep this conversation going for 5 times longer than the time we have. But for those who want to follow along, have your own conversations, see your insights, updates about WAX, what are some social handles that people could stay in touch with just to keep going with updates?
I do very little of that, to be honest. I do podcasts, I do speak at conferences, but I mostly like building stuff. But I do have a Twitter at William E. Quigley. But I'm going to say, I don't publish a lot. I probably should. Maybe when I stop building stuff, I'll start to publish more. But podcasts, there's a lot of podcasts where I've talked about a lot of things, especially tokenization, that somebody could Google and find.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, William. Maybe we'll have you back on to discuss tokenization in depth, and just because this has been such a wonderful conversation. We know you have to get out of here. For those of you who are watching or listening to Decentral Lounge today, thank you so much for tuning in. William, thank you again for being our guest, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of Decentral Lounge. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, William.
Thank you. Bye-bye.